Welcome in to the PHNX Suns podcast, brought to you by the DraftKings Sportsbook app, America's #1 sportsbook app. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a 5-star review. I'm Lindsey Smith here with Saul Bookman, Espo, and Gerald Bourguet. Gentlemen, today's question off the top is, what is your favorite video game system?
Oh, it is the GOAT, the Sega Genesis.
Boom.
Oh,
yes.
No.
Yeah, I
$1
wouldn't
million
have
There
it.
is no
for
argument
real.
for anything else.
FTW for the win. Let's go.
The only
Sega
correct
Genesis.
answer is a Nintendo 64.
No,
It's really
Great
not.
answer.
Nope.
The
No, it's really
only
not.
This
correct
is a
answer.
generational thing because we were in the sweet spot for the Sega Genesis. They were in the sweet spot for the 64.
I was in the sweet spot for the 64 too.
We would have been like
I remember
late
playing King
teens,
Griffey
early
Jr.
20, weren't we? when that came out?
For the 64?
Yeah. That was
Like 90s.
Yeah,
late
that was
90s,
90s.
early 2000s, wasn't it?
It was like
They-
it was early 90s.
Yeah, we
I
were
It was
thought.
like mid 90s.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't
Alright.
playing it
Sega
earlier.
Genesis
Alright,
and Nintendo 64 were all at the same time.
Sega Genesis came out in 93.
Okay, so if the
Super,
fucking
Super NES was at the same time as Sega Genesis. I watched the whole documentary. on
Okay,
video games.
So
all
the
right.
N64 was 96.
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Wow.
All right.
I'm
we
not that
still would
far
have been
off.
in that.
What's
We-
yours?
I respect the N64 pick. I also did enjoy that console, but
You goddamn right. You
I'm
did.
gonna go more modern. It's the Nintendo Switch. It's the best console ever. You can play it on the go at just the same as if it was plugged
Is
into
this
a
why you
TV.
don't ever want to come on to the show when
fantastic.
you're in the airport? It's because
I'm
you're too
just-
busy playing your Switch.
No. I wish it doesn't have that great of a battery. I won't lie. But
I get your
Form
point.
factor, yes.
I get your
Yes.
point because it does have a lot of really good pieces to it, but it's not.
it has the
There's
best
something
Mario
about
Kart. It has the best Legend
Oh,
of Zelda. and
excuse
it has
you.
the best Super Smash Brothers. That's all that I
N64
need.
Mario
All
Kart
that
beats
I need.
every other Mario Kart every
For
single
nostalgia, you go back and play. It's a little clunky
time. No,
Look,
it's
if you're
great.
gameplay wise.
If you're
No.
talking
Funky.
form factor,
No.
just being portable, you gotta go Game Boy just because it's the OG.
That's
That's
facts.
what brought
Game
us
Boys
to-
were
But
legit.
the quality on the Game Boy is like
But it's
very
what brought us
different.
the idea that you could even get to a Switch someday.
Yeah, I mean it's
is because of
innovative. It was innovative.
By the
for
way,
sure.
somebody in the chat said, well, a bunch of people have said the Sega Dreamcast.
I remember the
Which
I
Dreamcast.
don't think
the
I ever had
Dreamcast, short-lived. I was
Mhm.
debating between that and a PlayStation, and I went Dreamcast, and 2 weeks later they announced we're shutting down the company. No more games for this.
Oh, that
But
sucks.
one of the coolest things about the Dreamcast was you could play NFL 2K, and it wouldn't show your opponent the plays. There was a little screen on the remote control that you could flick through the plays and choose your plays without it being on the screen. And that was one of the coolest innovations, I thought.
You want to hear my sweet spot? It was
No.
Okay.
Yes, no, go ahead. What's your
Wow.
sweet spot, Jim?
The GameCube. No one talking about the GameCube.
I did have
trash.
a
Also,
GameCube, but I rarely
The
played it.
GameCube has the best Mario Kart and Double Dash, and the GameCube has the best Legend of Zelda in Wind Waker.
Stop.
Yep. Sorry.
Wind
Okay.
Waker's top 3, but it's not better than Breath of the
No,
Wild.
Breath of the Wild is the goat, but
Yeah,
still.
there you go.
All right. Well, enjoy video games if that's something that you're into. Hit me up on Fortnite.
Damn, that sounds
Let's play
judgmental
together.
as all hell. Shit.
Why is that
Because
judgmental?
you're like, if that's what you're into.
Well, not everybody's into video games.
Well, I mean, it just sounds so judgmental, is what it felt like.
But she's into video
Like,
games.
you are
so.
I know she is.
projecting.
It's going to be one of those kind of
All right,
days.
that was
on the
good. That was
program.
good. That was good. All right. Carry on.
All right. Moving right on along. Today's show, we are going to discuss Monty Williams and the coaching staff. We've gone through pretty much every player on this roster to this point. So it was only fair that we had a show dedicated to Monty and his staff.
When's the Frank Kaminsky episode? That's okay. Never
That's
mind.
not happening.
We had it back in November.
Saturday.
It's true.
Yeah.
When
That beautiful night when he scored 30 plus.
It'll be
in one
me by
game.
myself talking late night about Frank Kaminsky.
That'll be a
Confessions
special.
by the Cove. Yeah, let's
Me
go.
with a snifter
Yeah.
of brandy, just talking about Frank.
So I feel like there's been, I feel like it's pretty split. People who want to fully blame Monty, people who don't want to put any blame on Monty. And then there's a handful of people, obviously, in the middle who can see kind of both sides. Where are you guys at with this one?
I never place full blame on one particular entity, especially in a situation like this. I mean, it's not fair to anybody. For Monty on this specific team, I think he's more really. People are just asking him to manage the game. I think a little bit better than he showed, especially when it comes to player personnel. And for instance, if DA is on a roll in the first quarter, I understand that you typically like to take him out at the 6 to 8 minute mark, but shit, maybe we can get the most out of this little stretch here, and instead of benching him and thinking that he's just going to pick up right where he left off. And I think when guys are on a heater, Monty very much likes to stick to his script, and he'll make subtle adjustments here and there. But I think overall, especially when he got to the playoffs, he just seemed like he was just stuck down one lane for not only the substitution stuff, but also just game management and X's and O's stuff. It just he never seemed like he could get past a certain point and really give this team what they needed.
I'm kind of in the middle of the road with this one. Yeah, the chaps are on. I see where people are questioning some of the things Monty did. I understand the people that are giving him praise. Where, to me, I think he didn't manage things. The vibes were not immaculate. You could tell during the playoffs, right? At times. And he's kind of that chief vibes officer because he keeps everybody at a certain level, right? He knows how to.
I don't think that's what a chief vibe officer is.
He keeps I don't know that I would say that Monty's the chief vibe officer.
Well, okay.
I feel like JaVale McGee, maybe.
No, JaVale McGee is the chief of hype. I mean, that's what he's doing there. I think Monty keeps them where there's no panic ever, right?
Fair.
Where there wasn't infighting, where it was, I want to come into work and I want to win. I want to win for the guy next to me. That kind of mentality, right? Where it was a chill place to be for these guys, and it felt like things started to crack, and all of a sudden, well done is better than well said, and don't get happy on the farm. Those things didn't work anymore, in part because there may have been tensions. We don't know for sure. We never will, I don't think. But that there were tensions, or people were, an issue with, what he was, just an issue in general there. That's Monty Williams' job in part, is to make sure these guys are playing for one another, because you have Chris Paul, who was always kind of the coach on the court. But, I think Monty let the locker room kind of get a little bit away.
I struggle with this one because, like you've been saying, we don't know the full extent of it. We've heard the reports. We saw the blow up, the DA and Monty blow up. We've heard what was maybe said or not said there. And we heard, another report from Dan Bickley that there was some turbulence between Monty and Chris Paul. I think I'm more willing than most to chalk that up to, this was a 64-win team that had a ton of pressure on them, and they did not execute. And when they started losing and panic set in, that type of thing is natural. Like, if you're the best team in the NBA and you just suddenly stop playing like it, there's going to be those types of locker room tension. That goes for any team. But that stems back to the lack of execution compared to what we saw in the regular season. And that's where I take more of an issue with Monty with the on-court stuff, because they did not run a lot of their offense in the playoffs. And I know when you're playing the same team, 6 or 7 times in a series, they're going to know all your sets. They know all your sets anyway because they've been scouting you for this very moment. But they had one of the most creative pick and roll offenses in the NBA. They had something that enhanced everybody's abilities, brought out the best in everybody, and they got away from it in the playoffs, and they stopped executing. They started panicking. We saw it in Game 7 where they were just jacking up random shots, hoping for a foul, hoping for a bucket to fall. And that goes to coaching as much as it does to players not being able to execute, to Chris Paul being hurt, whatever you want to say. And that's where I take the biggest issue with Monty. Is he is great at preparing on a night-to-night basis, but when it comes to those playoff series where you're facing the same opponent over and over, it feels like he hasn't been able to make adjustments quick enough.
Well, I think that's kind of my point, though, is that panic did set in. They got away from what they did because of that, and Monty had always seemed like a calming force, And all of a sudden, when it got the toughest, he wasn't there as that calming force necessarily. That secret recipe he had during the regular season and over the last 2 years just didn't play out the way it had, you know?
But I don't know how much of that is on him as a coach or as a leader in the locker room. Like, he was still saying and doing the exact same things he did in the regular season. My issue is the on-court stuff wasn't working and guys reacted the way they did, or they stopped playing the way that they played. Also, like, again, we're never going to know the full extent of it, but like, it's hard to explain how a team that good goes to what we saw in the playoffs, and some of that has to, you have to chalk some of that up to coaching.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way around it, to be completely honest with you. But one Haydot in the chat brought up, I still believe Willie Green was the real defensive coach of this team. And that's something we had all talked about before the show started. For me specifically, I think that was a bigger hit to this coaching staff than maybe anybody realized outwardly anyway, until we really kind of got into the thick of it. I know in my experience with Willie, like, we know he was Monty's right-hand man, but he was Monty's right-hand man. Mm-hmm. Like, I think Willie was the one who brought a lot of those adjustments to the forefront and presented those things to Monty and helped him make those type of adjustments. And that's no shade to who is on Monty's staff now, but I just don't know if they have that person who is either confident enough to bring it up, or maybe it's not to the level that Willie was at just yet. I mean, obviously, if Willie is now a head coach in the NBA, that he was very talented as a coach, as an assistant coach.
Well, I also think his age and the fact that he wasn't that far removed from the league helps as well, because you have a different connection with the with the players than Monty would, having been a decade and a half removed from his playing days. So I think that impacts it as well too, because they may have felt more comfortable going and telling Willie something and expressing things that became pressure points for this team than they necessarily were with Monty, because we all know, if you've ever been in management, usually people don't come directly to management at the beginning of a problem. They tell somebody else that's working with them. And I think we've all been there. And I think that's part of
some shade.
No, it's just a natural
I'm
thing.
kidding.
You're kind of working through things in real time.
So
what do you know, Espo?
I'm sorry. No, but I think he may have been that outlet as well, and that can impact a team.
No, he's a super talented coach. And I do agree that Monty was probably missing that guy, and he has talented assistant coaches right now, but Willie's just a different kind of dude. And you could see that in their relationship, especially when they hugged at the end of the series against the Pelicans, and how much emotion was on Willie Green and even in Monty afterwards. So definitely meant a lot. However, listen, if you lose, great coaches lose assistants all the time because they're great coaches. And if we think Monty is what he has portrayed himself to be for the last 2.5 years, then he should have stepped up. You have to be good at making in-game adjustments, especially against a team that is inferior to you. And he just failed to do that in countless times throughout the playoffs. And that's what we're really talking about. We're not talking about the regular season. Yeah, 64 wins, franchise record. Everything was great. This is strictly a playoff discussion. And for Monty, you could even say there was a part last year in the finals. Granted, it was against Giannis, and he was just on another planet, and so was Chris Middleton, that maybe there were some adjustments that could have been made there, but just didn't happen. So,
well, yeah. I struggle with that, though, because the Bucks just proved to be the better team in that series. Like, I don't know what adjustments he was going to make that were going to suddenly stop Giannis.
Of course, get another Giannis. Hello.
Come on, Monty.
That's on James Jones. We'll save that for that episode.
But yeah, I the two things that bother me heading into this offseason are one, the fact that when we talked to him, maybe this has changed since then, but when we talked to him, he hadn't cleared the air with DA, and maybe that's just indicative of the Suns' offseason plans with him, but you would hope that is something that gets patched up. It was still raw because it was literally the morning after Game 7. Those feelings are still there. These guys are super competitive, and pride runs rampant in this league, even with a guy like Monty, even with a humble guy like DA. Like, these are still proud, really talented individuals. But I feel like that's something that needs to be addressed, if it hasn't already, is clearing the air of that sideline spat, because that's the type of thing that can linger, especially if they do bring him back And it's a situation where he signs an offer sheet with someone else and the Suns do the smart thing and match and kind of bring him back, not against his will, but he was willing to go elsewhere. That's the type of thing that can fester if you don't address it. And then the other thing is, this is something that I struggle with because it's what makes Monty such a likable and a good coach, is his faith in his guys and his trust in his system. It worked during the regular season. And when it didn't work in the playoffs, he erred on the side of believing that the larger sample size would win out. And in a playoff series, when you're talking about 4 wins sends you home, you have to be more willing to adjust. You have to be willing to veer from the system if it's not working, even if it's a 1 or 2 game thing. You know, we had been clamoring for Bismack Biyombo to take JaVale McGee's minutes as early as game 3, game 4, and that didn't happen as soon as it needed to. Those are just little tiny things that maybe they're not going to swing a series, but maybe they are. Like maybe you win 1 game on the road and that's all you need to win this whole series. So it's kind of upsetting, and it's unfortunate because it's one of those things where how do you adjust that? He said in his end of season interviews, like, I do err on the side of trusting my guys, especially the high rotation, high minute guys, because they're who got us here. And it's that faith that empowers everybody 1 through 15 during the season. But in the playoffs, you have to be able to go away from that if it's not working.
I know you said, that their percentages would win out, or however you phrased it. Yeah. But at the same time, like I feel like I hope it's the reason is he just doesn't have. He is sticking to that, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Instead of what the alternative could be, I just didn't have a second play, or I just didn't have this ready to go, or thought of this in the moment, whatever it was that might have been able to swing the pendulum the other direction. Like, listen, like he bears a lot of this responsibility, not only because of the way the playoffs were, but also, we talked about a little bit of development yesterday, and there's plenty of people out there that feel like DA didn't get the ball enough throughout the season or in the playoffs, whatever. And part of that is, okay, well, if DA is the future, and I would certainly hope that when he first got here, at least he thought that DA was going to be part of the future, then what are we doing to get him to another level? And listen, I think DA had plenty of opportunities to thrive in this system. I'm not saying that, but I would say, like, there was countless times where I felt like when they needed a bucket and Devin Booker wasn't getting it and Chris Paul wasn't getting it, then what set are you going to try and run to get DA the ball? In some of those times were the most pivotal, but it felt like everything was basically left up to Devin Booker and Chris Paul to decide. And I feel like that's just a fault of Monty's.
It's definitely something that, and I wrote about this today on PHNX about how they need to be less dependent on Chris Paul. It needs to be a less heliocentric offense around the backcourt, because we saw in the playoffs, you can't necessarily count on Chris Paul being fully healthy if they continue to take this approach and not limit his minutes, limit his games during the regular season. We've seen it enough times. His body is going to break down in some way. And when that happens, it's a lot easier to gang up on Devin Booker defensively, and that's a problem. They need to empower their ball handlers, their shooters, and DA to bear more of that burden. And Monty said that in his exit interviews. He talked about, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, Landry Shamet as guys that he probably going into next season wants to empower more, give them the ball, and let them go try to get a bucket. So when these situations arise, they're better prepared. But I do see this opinion a lot that, like, Monty's holding DA back, or Monty doesn't like DA, or he doesn't focus on getting him the ball enough. And it's one of those things where I struggle with that, because the other centers on this team, and DA himself included, have talked about how this team, this coach, sets up their centers better than anywhere they've ever played before. Like, JaVale's been on enough teams to know, and it goes back to that thing. Like, when DA's doing the little things, setting screens hard, rolling hard with purpose, crashing the offensive glass, he's an absolute monster. He got away from that, and the Suns in Game 7 did a terrible job of trying to get him involved. I think that was a one-game thing, but I don't buy into this criticism that, like, Monty doesn't build up DA. He builds him up better than any coach DA has had to this point.
Yeah, I see that, and I understand that, but part of me wonders how much of the system, we've gone a while without getting into that, but how much of Monty's system is predicated simply on CP3 and CP3's decision making rather than the actual offense, and how much does that impact DA as well? Is it CP3 or Devin Booker when he's the primary ball handler choosing not to go in DA's direction and choosing the other options in the offense as well?
I think that could be part of it, but like I don't want to go down the path of speculating that like, is Chris Paul doing enough to help DA? Because like,
I don't mean it like
he's the big man whisperer. Like, he's one of the best in NBA history at he made DeAndre Ayton a first team All NBAer. Like, and DeAndre Jordan, and DeAndre Jordan's career has gone completely downhill since then.
Oh, and I'm not saying blame, but I'm saying these are the guys that are given the options within the offense. It's not as if Monty's calling a set that's specifically not going to DA in the offense. So I think it's a little more complicated than Monty isn't feeding DA the ball. You know,
I also don't feel like the whole Monty DA thing is really that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Really?
I have questions about
like
this.
I'm just like, okay. I mean, listen, I'm going to put this in layman's context because that's all we know. We're not an NBA star. We're not star NBA players here, right?
Right.
But like if I had beef with one of you guys, or like you guys come in, you guys were upset, or we yelled at each other, I don't feel like that would last through 3 or 4 months, number one, but that even a couple days afterwards, after things have calmed down, like everything wouldn't just be okay. Like you get through it. That happens, you know, like they're in the heat of the battle. They're getting their ass absolutely kicked on national television in a game clinching game. In a series clinching game, and they walk off, and Monty's like, I need you, and DA's like, fuck that. Like, and okay, well, listen, like, he's upset because you're not using him, or he feels like he's not getting as much leeway or run, or whatever the reason DA is upset, and you're upset because you feel like he quit. It's all right. After the game's over and we've already lost because we're about to, we move on.
Yeah, but I feel like that's like saying the couple that you hang out with a lot, you saw them argue one time on a date, and I'm sure they'll just get over it, but it's what happens behind closed doors.
Okay,
sure,
but
have
they argued before?
Has there been any indication this season that there has been turmoil or anything in that locker room whatsoever?
But I'm basing it on, we're now hearing DA was supposedly asking for a trade, saying he wants out. If for Monty to explode on the sideline, and if he really did say,
did he ask for a trade?
That's what the report.
No,
was.
I thought
the report was
said
that the Suns explored trading him for.
Yeah,
and there was a report that DA has expressed he wanted to go elsewhere.
Yeah, but that's not requesting a trade.
Not a trade demand, but saying he wants to go elsewhere. Thus, I don't want to be here in this mix in the middle of going for a championship.
When? Do you know?
I don't know. They said a couple of months, I believe the report said, that it wasn't as if it just happened in the playoffs. It had been expressed. But, we don't know. But for Monty Williams to, if he really did say you freaking quit on us, for Monty Williams to lose his cool in public, say it that way, I feel like there's more than just that moment, because Monty Williams has always been so good at not losing his cool in those moments. So it's all speculation. We don't know. But the one thing that stood out to me was it's internal, and that was all he would say. And then the next day saying, I haven't talked to him. If you and I had an office blow up and I screamed at you, you're damn
which
right.
Has happened before.
Which has. You're damn right I'm coming to you the next morning and saying, I lost my cool, right? The first chance I got.
To be fair, the stakes are very different. Like,
we're
we're comparing it
here.
to like an office spat. They're not higher here.
They're higher here.
They're not higher
because
here.
If I lose my job, I'm not sitting on 7 figures I've been making for a while.
But you're not
True.
getting paid millions
True.
to compete nationally in front of millions of people. Like,
yeah, but
if
they're not
our
thinking
job,
they're not thinking about the money in the moment in the heat of battle.
But that's what I'm saying is, if our job had us in front of a national audience of millions of people,
Look at the camera. There's millions right there.
Why are you downplaying us,
Jeez.
Gerald? How dare you?
Gerald, I see how it is.
My bad, guys.
They're
I thought we were big time.
Millions of viewers. Thank you.
What am I even doing here then?
I mean, for real.
Well, now we got to have a fight, because I thought we were talking to millions of people.
I'm just
Sorry,
saying
Gerald.
the stakes are different. And I think that matters a little bit before we start comparing if one of us got in a fight to if these dudes who get paid millions to compete every night and are very competitive. Like, I love you guys, but we're not on that level of
I
competition.
would almost argue the opposite in this situation. Okay, DA tells Monty to go fuck off. Guess what? DA's still going to get paid. He might not get paid the max here, but he's still going to get paid.
But
that's almost less pressure because I know I can go somewhere else and get money.
We're not comparing us getting in an office fight to getting in a fight in a Game 7 blowout at home in front of millions of people.
No, but we're talking employee to employee altercations.
But that's not all that this is. There's more that goes into it than that.
Like what? Despite the fact that they make more money and they play a sport, what?
And they play a sport in front of millions of people. They had their own fans booing them at home.
We're talking
Nobody's
about
in the studio.
We're even talking about behind the scenes.
Well, I'm simply saying tensions run high in a moment, right?
Yeah.
That in game that tension runs high. I'm saying 12, 13, 14 hours removed from it. I think now that and emotions run higher, like you're saying, in an NBA game than Saul and I sitting in a 1,500 square foot office. It's like, it's different. But that's why I think you'd almost be more prone to going and saying, hey, especially if you're Monty, hey, I apologize for the way things went down on that sideline, because the emotions are easier to just fall into because you are competing. So you give into that a little bit more. But I also think when you come down off that emotion, it'd be a little easier to go to your player. If you feel like, hey, this is a guy I'm going to be here with for years, you go, hey, I'm sorry I yelled at you.
I think it's more important on the outside for us to be able to say, like, yeah, it's more important for Monty to go talk to DA than it would be for you to talk to Saul if you argued. But, like, the tensions and the stakes are much higher, so I don't blame them for having those emotions and for not fixing it the next fucking morning, especially when they stay up late, probably rewatching or not being able to sleep after getting embarrassed in front of their own fans after getting booed off the court.
But all we hear about is Monty texts guys late night. Monty's this great encourager. Monty, is the player whisperer.
That doesn't mean he's perfect.
I'm not saying that he's perfect. I'm just saying I would have just assumed that would have been part of what he would do as part of his MO.
My biggest beef here is that regardless of what happened, like the night of the game, that's one thing. It's an in the moment, heat of the moment type of situation. My biggest concern is the next day when Monty came out. Because Monty is very calculated with his words, he chooses them wisely. He wants to make sure he's putting the right message across, what he truly means. He's very thoughtful. When he was asked, have you spoken with DA since yesterday's game and the argument situation, he straight up said, no, I haven't. Which I think that added so much more fuel to this fire and this whole conversation than anything leading up to it. Had Monty said, no, we haven't had the opportunity yet, but we intend to. It would be a completely different conversation that everybody in Phoenix would be having right now. They'd be like, oh yeah, it was just a heat of the moment argument, Game 7, because they were getting their butts whooped on national TV. Yeah, everyone in that situation was probably pissed off. But it's fine. They'll figure it out because that's what they do. But that's what I think is the biggest thing that turned this whole thing upside down and made everyone question what really is happening between them. How long has this been going on? And then the rumors start swirling around, and now we have this whole thing on our hands.
I don't think that's the part that bothers me. The part that bothers me is when he was asked if DA is part of the future, and he kind of dismissed the question and said, James and I will talk about it over the summer. That's bullshit. The part that bothers me.
That's absolutely bullshit.
But that's the part that bothers me, because if he had said, no, we haven't talked yet, and then had been asked that question and said, yes, he's absolutely part of our future, then I would be like, okay, he's probably going to talk to him this week. That's the part that bothers me. I don't give a shit if he hasn't talked to him within 10 hours after the fucking game ends.
But I think Lindsey's point is the one I was trying to get at too here. It's what he said. He's a calculated guy in the way he says it. So if he says, no, I haven't, and he pairs it with, we're going to talk about that, James and I, that's sending a direct signal that this was more than smoke. It was fire. There's something more going on there. And that's what bothered me about it, because it's so opposite of Monty's MO and the way he handles things. So that's what strikes me as so damn odd about it, because it just, none of it seems in character, which worries me about it.
Which is fair. Like I'm not trying to dismiss your guys' concerns about that particular thing. I just think that part, like you were saying, Saul, like that part was a little bit overblown. Like that's something that they could sweep under the rug if they want to, and maybe they have, and we don't even know it yet. Like we haven't talked to Monty since literally 10 hours after Game 7 ended. So,
but that's also, you know, like you were talking about the calculated thing, you know, like even if you cannot stand DA, like he should have known better than to say what he said. He should have said, like, yeah, but I plan to, and he is definitely a part of our future, because you still got to sell this dude. Like, even if you don't want him on your team, you still got to sell him.
What happens if they can't move him this offseason and they have him on this team next year? Are you going to, that's on you then as the head coach to mend that relationship. That's also on DA because he's an adult and should be a professional in this league. I'm not saying it's just on Monty, but if you said something like that publicly, then it's going to open the door for DA to hold grudges and be petty and spiteful, where if you had just like said the right thing, even if it was just to appease the rest of the national media or media in general and DA, if he had watched it, you should still do it. You know what I mean? Like you should still do it because you don't know what's actually going to be able to be accomplished this offseason, whether you want him on your team or not.
Well, and that Nibble, I guess that's how you say it, in the chat says, Book's response about DA immediately after Game 7 was more concerning to me. I think you couple what Book said with everything else, and it's like trying to put together small pieces of a large puzzle. You're starting to get a feel for it. No, Buck Doug, no, this is not going to be a Markieff Morris situation. No. They're not going to just sit him in purgatory until they trade him for pennies on the dollar because they didn't sell him right. Icon with the super chat saying he's more concerned about Monty using Ayton to set picks 30 feet from the basket than he is about the fact that he hasn't texted.
You know, at the beginning of Game 7, that was the first thing I said. I was like, oh, cool, we're starting an offense all the way at the half-court line. That's fun. And it was not good after that.
I mean, you got to when they're hounding CP3 up the court, but that's a whole separate issue.
All right, so we had a lot of action in the first half of this show. You can also get some action on the DraftKings Sportsbook app. I think we all could use a cooling period just for 5 seconds here. But if you have not downloaded the DraftKings Sportsbook app, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, this is the week to do that. New customers can bet $5 on any team to win and get $150 in free bets if they do. And if you're already a user of the DraftKings Sportsbook app and you're looking to turn a small bet into a potentially big payday during the NBA playoffs, you can do that with the same game parlays. And right now, all customers can place a same game parlay with 3 or more legs and get a free bet back up to $25 if one leg does not hit. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. Use promo code PHNX. Bet $5 on any NBA team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. That's promo code PHNX only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Just a reminder, that is 21 and older only, Arizona only, gambling problem, 1-800-NEXT-STEP. New customers only, minimum $5. Minimum deposit, eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Espo, do you have a pick of the week for us?
I do.
What you got?
It's the Warriors money line tonight.
Okay.
They're putting an end to Dallas. The Warriors are going to respond after what was a pretty embarrassing Game 4. I think this one's over tonight in San Francisco.
They still almost came back.
Yeah, they did in the end.
All right, well, there you have it. That's our DraftKings pick of the week. All right, so one of the things, Espo, that you wanted to kind of have a conversation around, which we probably don't have the answers for, but it's still worth having a discussion around. When you find yourself in a situation where there's turbulence in your locker room or throughout your team, whose kind of responsibility is that to kind of get the team out of that funk? Or maybe what's a better way of asking that question that you want to kind of talk about, Espo?
Look, I think it's on both the players and the coaches, but the whole idea of culture, right? That got thrown at us so much in the last 2 years, really since the bubble, talking about the program, the culture. We never really saw it under pressure, under scrutiny, because even though they lost in the finals, we're playing with house money. This is unexpected. This is such a magical ride. The first time we really saw adversity, it seemed like that culture in ways crumbled in certain
I don't think
ways.
that's fair.
Yeah,
Chris Paul got a shoulder sting literally the first game of the playoffs and couldn't play with but one arm in the first round. Chris Paul missed 2 games to start the Western Conference Finals, and campaign stepped up. I don't think we should lose sight of. I understand what you mean about the Suns being able to skip
internal
steps.
struggle. I don't mean that they didn't face injuries and stuff, but it seemed like the first time we saw cracks internally. I mean, even they last year were on along for that ride, right? Everybody was riding high, and it was like, okay, an injury got thrown at us, but yeah, we're that team, But then it seemed like you started to see cracks in belief, guys not playing as well, and all of a sudden, things started to change.
Even the pregame warm-up stuff kind of started to dwindle in the playoffs, did it not? It just kind of felt like they weren't having fun anymore.
Sort of. And I think that could be what you guys are speaking to. It could also just be like, we got to stop giving other teams bulletin board material with this best team in the motherfucking world.
Why would you change? To me, you don't change that midstream just because, maybe it upsets a team. If that's your swagger,
I agree.
That's what you do. And to me, it only stops if or changes if somebody internally gets upset about it. If somebody says, why are you doing this? What the hell are you guys doing? You're making us look like clowns or something, which to me is a crack in that culture, because either that's what you embrace and that's who you guys are, or you're not. But if the culture is, this great thing, it weathers the storm. It gets you through issues. It when it's the toughest, you don't see a team that comes out and looks like they don't give a shit in Game 7. Like, that's not culture. That's problematic is what you're seeing out there. You're seeing guys give up. And if you've got a great culture, part of that is not giving up ever.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Like, I'm just speculating as to why the pregame stuff didn't seem as flamboyant as before. I do think there is something to be said of they've been doing it all season. They should have kept doing it, but also, like, it's the playoffs. People are going to take that clip and run with it like they did. There was a clip of them doing their pregame thing like they had done all the time, and they got blown to hell for it.
When did they not get blown to hell this whole season for anything that they did?
I don't think they got.
Book got roasted so many times. Like, they've had the same thing. That's just what our social media culture is nowadays.
Right.
If you do anything that is remotely fun and playful and you lose, they're going to take that and be like, see, they don't take themselves seriously.
They need to be humbled.
Yeah, they need to be humbled. Like, at what point in time do you say, who gives a you-know-what about what the outside world thinks? All that matters is what we think about each other, because we're the ones who are actually playing the game.
People have been saying that about the Warriors the whole time. You know what I mean? So that's why they had to change. Like, I would hope that it wasn't like they just decided like, oh, well, maybe we need to tone it down a bit. Like, just be you. And that's who they were. Like, the Warriors do the same shit. Fuck, the Mavericks were doing it against us. Like, clowning and stuff like that. I'm like, and sometimes it turns around to bite you in the ass. Ask LeBron and the salsa and all that bullshit with the Lakers last year. And sometimes it doesn't. And I don't feel like that really plays a part in either way.
Well, and it felt like their mentality all along was, who the heck cares what everybody else says? We're going out here and proving it.
Right.
So why does that change? And we're assuming.
I think because they stopped proving it, and then they did start to care what everyone was saying.
I also, I was thinking about this.
Which might have been the downfall.
Well, I was thinking about this driving home yesterday. I was thinking about Jesus, from the bubble, and I know they still had like a month and a half off after the bubble. But from the bubble to the season, playoffs, and then especially for like Devin Booker, straight to the Olympics, right back into the season, boom, boom, boom. Like, I do wonder if that many games in that many days maybe finally caught up to them in the playoffs, because they did not look like the supercharged team that we had basically seen for parts of the season. They definitely didn't look like they were as fast or as aggressive as they were last year. It just looked like a completely different team. Even this year going through the season, I was like, they're playing really, really well. Some of these games, I'm like, how do they win that game? Like, it was just kind of like, I'm not gonna say fluky, but just kind of like sometimes it goes your way those days. You know what I mean? And then they get to that point and they really didn't have that. It was just, I wonder if there's something to it.
I don't think that's just a Suns problem. You look at the playoffs and you're seeing a lot of weird, lopsided wins both ways. Like I think a lot of these guys have hit a wall because they've played in a very weird rhythm for 2.5 years, which is unnatural for these guys. They're creatures of habit, creatures of rhythm. So when you get them in this, I think we're seeing it a lot, and I think you'll continue to see it in the finals too, where it's just this uneven. It doesn't seem to make sense why it's happening the way it is.
So we kind of went a couple side streets there within that conversation.
Shocker.
Which posed a question from the chat. Darth Boyd said, why do opposing fan bases hate the Suns so much? We've never hurt anyone's feelings outside of the Clippers. Seriously, who have we beat to the point that their fan bases hate us?
There's 2 reasons. Suns and 4 guy and that jackass waving his money around during the finals. That's why people, I think, hate us.
I feel like those.
Are you for real with this?
Yes.
Well, the Suns
because those were the visual national embodiments of Suns fandom were those 2 things. And then you add in some of us, myself included, could be real assholes about it on Twitter.
Yes.
You go ahead and you look at it and you go, for decades, the Suns were beloved. Everybody loved it. The Phoenix Suns were everybody's second favorite team. You go 10 years in the dumpster, then you come out with those 2 guys that were the face of things, and then the Twitter discourse, it adds up, and all of a sudden, the Phoenix Suns somehow are the most hated group in the NBA.
It's also because of, let's be honest. Let's say what it is.
Please.
Us as fans and Suns fandom, they've been waiting, like Espo said, for like 10 years. And there's another thing to this, the Booker factor.
Yes.
People since Booker was, his rookie year, have been saying he's the future, he's the franchise. You guys hate him because you're always moving the goalposts on greatness. So he scores 30. Oh, well, he's scoring 30 on a bad team. He scores 30 on a good team. Well, he has CP3. So there's this little bit of disgruntledness from Suns fans, which is deservedly so. So when they finally have a team to back up everything that they've been seeing with the Suns, or especially Devin Booker, I mean, every little drop of sugar, you would see ants to that conversation on Twitter. If JJ Redick was pumping up something about the Suns, boom, here we are in droves. So because they were thirsty, and so then they would do the same thing to other fan bases. If somebody said something outlandish about the Suns, they would attack, which I'm okay with.
Is that exclusive to Suns fans?
No,
though?
but I think it was a perfect storm.
I think it was, but I think we came at it with a lot of aggression is probably not the right word, but we had a fire and a thirst to be involved in those conversations.
They weren't just fans; they were fanatics.
Yeah.
We seemed like religious zealots, like with the way that we would gang up on any bad opinion of Booker, and I think that plays into it because people don't like to be wrong about their sports opinions, and with Devin Booker, so many of them were wrong, and the only thing that people that are wrong about their opinions hate more than that is to have it rubbed in their face. And that's what Suns fans do a lot. And God bless them because they've been waiting for a decade to be able to do this. But because the Suns skipped steps and because they went from, bubble sensation to finals team, like other people can't stand it. And when you're constantly rubbing it in their face, that's going to happen.
Especially teams like Utah and Denver specifically. Denver's upset, obviously, because
DNVR hates us sometimes.
because they lost Jamal Murray. And they feel like we're too cocky for our own britches. And then Utah can't stand us because we basically did what they did except better.
Yeah.
And we have the better 2 guard, which was also another debate widely out there on social between Devin Booker and Donovan Mitchell. And people would look at the Suns and the Utah Jazz. If you took off the uniforms, you would not be able to tell who is who. But once you put the uniforms on, for whatever reason, we're able to get to another level higher, which we basically have our entire franchise's duration, even though, ironically enough, Utah has a higher winning percentage than the Suns.
Neither team has won a championship either. But we even ripped off their city jerseys, right? They had the gradient mountain. We had the valley. We were like, hey, suck it, Utah. I think it. Coda Kid in the chat said, let these fans enjoy going to the game. One guy committed assault. The other guy emptied his bank account so he could wave his money around. That's not enjoying a game. It's just looking like a jackass. All right.
Look, Suns in 4 grew to something that I did not like, but in that guy's defense, he did have beer poured on him, and the other guy swung first.
Yeah, and the other guy had the upper hand.
I'm
for
not
sure.
saying. I'm just
still
saying
wrong.
he
It's still,
wasn't.
it's still
He
wrong.
wasn't
In an
doing that as a
isolated
let's enjoy the
situation.
game.
Yes.
He was beating the crap out of a guy and said it.
My problem was afterwards. I think there was another fight or two that broke out at Talking Stick, or it was the Footprint at that point at our hometown, and that was solely on us. The Suns in 4 incident inspired us to be our worst selves. And and it's carried over. It carried over to this season with the stupid Suns in 4 chants after game 2.
So what you're saying is we needed to be humbled.
Honestly, a little bit.
We didn't need to be humble.
No, never.
I'm just kind of
54 years of being humbled. Screw this.
A little bit. I'm going to say a little bit.
Ay vey. All right. Well, what are you gonna do?
There was a whole new generation of Suns fans that jumped on board during the bubble that had to learn the pain of being a Suns fan. That's what it was.
Yeah, probably. All right, gentlemen. Any other thoughts on mostly Monty, since that was the topic of conversation for today's show?
I just want to say that as bad as it is right now, and as much as this mid-range heavy offense needs to change, and they need to figure out what's going on with DA and mend those bridges, we should also not forget that Monty has not been a head coach in this league for a number of years like some of these other guys. Jason Kidd is new at this. Obviously, Willie Green new. I'm not talking about the playoff matchups, but he's going to get better at this stuff. And I think he can. We saw him make a jump this season in terms of his game-to-game preparedness. And there's a reason guys went out of their way to praise not just the man that he is, but how prepared he had them on a night-to-night basis. I think he needs to veer away from some of that unflinching faith in his guys and change things as needed in a playoff series. But there's a reason the Suns were a top 5 offense and defense, and it's not just personnel. They had really good schemes on both ends of the floor, and he's empowered a lot of these younger players and helped them grow in ways that we weren't seeing under the prior 4 coaches that Devin Booker had in his first few years here. So I know that it sucks right now and that it's easy to question the culture, but expectations shifted rapidly from when he first got here. When he first got here, we were okay, maybe we'll make the playoffs the first year. And then Chris Paul's first year, it was okay, we should definitely make the playoffs. It was never championship or bust, which it is now. And so expectations have jumped significantly, and he has to catch up with those. But the growth we've seen since he first got here shouldn't fly under the radar. Well,
and you would hope as assistant coaches grow as well as part of it. And maybe they're more comfortable, in that second year, making some additional suggestions when it comes to those times. Hey, what about, I was watching film, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? Mm-hmm. Because, you build that rapport after, some extra time there as well. So you hope that's another internal growth area.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, the biggest thing is now that we've talked about players, coaches, things of that nature, I think having gone through the last few weeks to just kind of take all this in, discuss it openly, I'm not ready to give up on either of them, players or coaches. There are a handful of things that obviously need to be adjusted. But if you were to, quote unquote, say, run it back with a few changes of the things that you need to address, certain areas that you really need to bring in new people or bolster, I wouldn't be disappointed next season. I think we have a good coaching staff. I think we have a solid core group of guys that I think can be successful with some time. You know what I mean? Like you all said, we skipped steps. It wasn't necessarily that it was a pipe dream by any means, because I do think the Suns had a legitimate chance at winning a title. But sometimes you just have to have a little bit more reps. Sometimes you need a little bit more experience to get over things like a culture struggle or just a hardship within your locker room. You know what I mean?
I would be completely disappointed if they just run it back. If it
not completely,
but I mean, if it's just, we added another backup point guard, if that's the big move this summer, the big change, I'm not going to be very happy about this. I'm writing this for the PHNX newsletter, but
I thought you forgot where we were.
The column, no, I think the newsletter, the column for that, and I think it's time to take a big swing. I think it's time to find that guy, as you said, Gerald, in your piece today, that can let CP3 take that step back and not be a main focus in the offense. Could be the third or fourth option in there. Like, it's time to take a swing, because the championship chances don't come around that often. You have one now. Make a move and bolster this team.
I'll say this right now. I am not on board with a lateral move for DA.
I don't. I'm not saying lateral.
No, I'm talking for myself,
Okay,
not for
sorry.
you. I just.
I'll apologize.
If they trade for a Capella and a Herter or whatever, I'm like, okay, well, you got a little bit better, but how much better did you really get? I don't want to see that. Listen, DA's still young. We talk about everybody else. DA is still a very, very young player. Like, and so when you if you trade away DA, you are trading away potential. And we historically in the NBA, bigs have taken a longer time to develop than guards and forwards. They just have. Now, in today's NBA, it's changed a little bit, obviously, but DA's still a big man, and he's 6'11", and he's still kind of immature. He's still trying to find his way around things. Like, I don't know if I would want to sacrifice that for, like, the said trade I just mentioned. Like, now, if we're going to get a superstar in here, obviously that changes the equation, but I just have this feeling. I have this feeling DA is coming back.
I think, you look at how difficult it is to navigate a sign and trade, and we'll talk about some specific DeAndre Ayton sign and trades next week, but it's really hard to get a good return back in that type of situation, because you have 3 different parties that you have to somehow satisfy their demands in that trade, and it's difficult to do that. And the cap rules make it really difficult to get back the type of salary that you want. So I agree with you, and I think the Suns know that, and I think they are perfectly fine with all this speculation that, they're not going to match or they're going to let him walk, because then it's real easy to just match an offer sheet and be like, yes, we got him for less than the 5-year max. We still have that designated max spot available, because you can only have 2 of those on a roster, and that will open them up, keep their flexibility to make a move for a disgruntled superstar if it comes about.
There was a great thread by the 4 Point Play, and and if you haven't checked it out, I'm sure all of us have tweeted about it. It's phenomenal. It kind of breaks down how things would work and why definitely things are not as bad as they seem, because the Suns have set themselves up for success, which is pretty terrific.
Well, I was going to reference that. I think you can keep DA and still go big game hunting.
Yeah,
and I think that's the path you should probably walk down this off season and make some decisions other places. If they will, who knows? Again, I'm going to go back to, we're not even sure who's going to be signing the checks when free agency opens. So that could dramatically change the approach to any of this too, if it's somebody different because of whatever comes out of this investigation as well.
All right, gentlemen, we've been telling all of our listeners for a really long time now, COVID-19 vaccines are free for everyone 5 and older. Those 12 and older are also now eligible for a booster. So let's all do the right thing, keep everyone safe as we get together this summer, and make sure we're all healthy for hopefully a really fun upcoming Suns season. So if you want to find a vaccine location near you, go to azhealth.gov/find-vaccine. It's time to close out the show with ad read roulette.
Let's spin the wheel.
The wheel,
Lucky
the wheel,
winners
the wheel,
today.
The wheel of destiny.
Spin that wheel. Here we go.
That was really good.
Round and round. You
You
don't
like that?
know.
Yes.
Damn it.
Yes.
Please don't let it be
I
Cookie
was
Monster.
so
That was
Please.
close to my face.
Espo is up. What
I thought it
what
was
do you
too.
have to? What voice
I don't-
do you use?
let's find
Let's
out.
see.
Oh, please be
I can't
WWE.
even read these.
What
so
does the
let me-
wheel give us?
French. Which ad am I reading? I better pull it
Oh,
up.
geez.
Oh, okay.
It's always
so
OGs.
Yeah. It's the easiest one to do.
It is. Let me pull open
I've
my.
got French blood in me, Espo, so don't offend me.
Oh, boy.
I have French and French Canadian blood, so I'm
Oh,
about
do
to
you?
offend myself.
Oh, man, this is gonna be
My
so bad.
ancestors are not going to be happy with me here. Let's
Do
get
it
to
like
the
Pepe Le Pew.
it's gonna be worse. You just gonna stop by your local dispensary and grab some amazing OGs, some scratch made
Oh my
THC
God.
gummies
Your
from
voice
your
cracked.
friends. at
Still
OG.
somehow Cookie Monster.
Oh
He's exactly like Cookie Monster.
It's all my
He's
impressions.
going,
It's Baguette Monster.
I like the cheese. Oh. And the baguette.
nobody
Let me
talks
ride
like
my
that.
little bicycle in my beret. If you're interested in trying these amazingly delicious
I'm
varieties
so
of
offended.
flavors in OG bread, have to offer, go to ogsbronze.com. That's ogecbronze.com to find OGs near you.
The Cookie
You
Monster
dirty
and
swine.
That
friends.
was the macaron monster.
Okay, at first
my
you sounded
God.
like the candlestick off of Beauty and the Beast.
Oh my God.
Be our guest.
Lumiere.
And then you just went right back to Cookie Monster.
Yep.
That's fantastic. Great job, Espo.
The Frenchman is loose.
That was terrible.
I think that was the funniest one.
I'm
though.
now offended France. Oh, man.
Apologies.
That's tough.
Thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate you. We'll be back tomorrow at 2 p.m. So come hang out with us once again. Until then, check out gophnx.com for Gerald's article that he mentioned early on in the show. He's still writing great content for that site. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Lindsey Smith AZ. You can follow Saul at Saul_Bookman. You can follow Gerald
For
at
that
Gerald
site.
Bourguet.
Our site.
And you can
Yeah,
follow
same thing.
Espo at Espo.
It's our company, I think.
Listen, it happens, okay? Espo, take us home.
Got to understand me, I'll always wreck the family. Rally in the valley like Dan G, no plan B. Always on the job, my team move like the mob. Turn the beat on, I throw it down like DA on the live. Best combo since KJ, Marley, and Charles. If you squad, just sitting on the chat, get involved. Rhymes say it's got flavor. Known to shine greater, glide like Tom Chambers in Bulls versus Lakers. Off that pick, I'm